what we've been doing, this is the second call, but we had a 0 as well, which was more informal. First one was this Tuesday, and we're going to have also next Tuesday, next Thursday. But the agenda, like Lass asked the other day, is really just come on the call, have an open discussion around governance in general, even governance in the real world versus Cardano governance, and focus a bit on the Constitution as well. So there's a Miro board where you can drop some things. I noticed someone dropped a lot of text in there, and maybe I can share the link for that one. Jeff, I think you're hearing
that was probably me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you have your mic a bit too loud. We're getting a bit of ambient from your side as well. So I'm going to drop the link on the chat in case anyone doesn't have it handy. Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
So, yeah, I'm going to ask you just to, when you want to speak, you unmute, but regularly if you keep muted, because we're getting a lot of static background from your side. Okay. Thank you. Cheers. Maybe what we can do very, very quickly in 1 minute or a few seconds is just go around the table and say hi, and then we jump onto the board and keep it practical to make the best use of our time, okay? So my name is Lucas. I've been working with Maestro, but now I'm transitioning full-time to 45B. Organizing this event has actually been a catalyst for that, because it made me realize also I want to pick up some catalyst proposals that I had funded. And so, yeah, 45B is going to be my main home for the next at least 6 months to see how I can spin up a number of things. And just on that topic, we want to be mostly an onboarding house for non-technical businesses and private users of Cardano. So focused on real use cases, not necessarily DeFi or anything like that. Thanks. Can we have just like a few seconds from each?
Sure, I can go. My name is Sebastian. You can call me Seba. I've been in the Cardano community for a while, and since the last 2 months, I'm working on Cardano Foundation in the community team. And I'm not a governance expert, but it's a subject that I like much, actually. And I've been the last 2 weeks since we met for the first time, trying to read the draft of the Constitution, getting as much knowledge about how the DREPS works and all the new process from CIP 1694. So yeah, I'm very happy to share with you guys and meet on the 21st for the workshop. And yeah, I've been like representing as myself as an individual in that occasion, but it will be a good place to meet each other and create community as well here in Lisbon.
Hi everyone, I'm Robertino. I'm an engineer at IOG, but I'm here by myself. And I'm not really familiar with the current constitution, but I mean, I read a draft a while ago, and actually I'm more familiar with like the implementation of on the tech side than on the actual like the rules that govern the implementation. So, but I'm really interested into seeing like what we can actually decide that can be translated into actionable rules that can be enforced. And also after seeing a bunch of Twitter threads about discussions about how much like the DREPs should get rewarded and how much power it's one AIDA and it's linear and stuff like that, I'm very interested into figure out something that actually works before it's too late. So
So should we do a presentation, right, of ourselves, as far as I understand, right, Pedro?
Yeah, just a few seconds. Yeah.
So hello, everyone. Rafael here from General. We are building a crypto inheritance and recovery DApp. In terms of the Constitution, I kind of participated in some workshops before online and all of that, gave my feedback. But yeah, besides that, I'm now catching up with the draft to be more prepared for our event, I guess. And yeah, I think I'm concerned with it, of course, because now we'll be making the decisions that if you're building on Cardano or anything like that, the decisions that will be made by us, by the community are important. The Constitution is important. And naturally worried about things such as the principles and also the upgradability of governance and the Constitution, because I don't think we're going to have something quite what we need in the future. I think we'll still need to do a lot of work afterwards.
Thanks, Rafael. Monique, do you want to say hi? We're just giving a quick introduction to where we're coming from, what we do.
Sure. My name is.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My name is Monique Chanchin. I am dialing in from the United States, New York, Brooklyn specifically. And I am really interested in just becoming more involved in the governance and constitutional process. I am actively exploring joining the civics committee and just want to become more engaged and learn more. I'll be attending the Constitutional Committee Workshop in Philadelphia on Saturday. So honestly, like I'm just in deep dive of mode of learning, researching, and connecting with as many people as possible so I can be prepared as informed as possible.
And I think we only have Jeff missing. Thank you,
Hey,
Monique.
hi, welcome. Can you hear me? Did I
Yeah,
fix it?
yeah, all good.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, hi, I'm Jeff. I've been sort of lurking, watching Cardano things basically forever. I got into it because I've been doing Haskell for a long time, and so I always thought it was technically really cool, but I didn't like how it was a little bit centralized, and I know HK was running everything. Like, I know it's unavoidable, but like, I told myself if it ever looks like it was going to successfully decentralize, I would get on board, and I think it's definitely time now. So I'm really excited that it's finally happening. Yeah. I'm interested in maybe becoming a D-Rep, but I haven't really. I'm not sure how feasible that is when I haven't I'm not a known community member or anything. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm also very interested in everything like governance. I love this sort of like possible little network state things going. So yeah, and I'm currently going through the sort of like self-placed through those pioneers too. So that's cool. Yeah, I'm just excited to catch up on everything.
So I'm just juggling windows here. Thanks, Jeff. Your voice is a bit robotic, but I think we got a bit of where the gist of where you're coming from. And overall, what I get from your introductions was really interesting because it's one or two of you mentioned the time frame that we're in already, and it's like a moving train that we can't stop. So the importance of getting governance right the first time, or addressing it quickly, is something that actually I don't know if I can identify the mechanisms apart from these debates and this feedback that we're going to have on the 21st, and then the train is in motion for Argentina, and for things to go ahead. Depends on how disputed things become. But if not, if everyone just quiets down, it's going to follow its course. That's sort of, I think, a vertigo for a lot of people, including myself. Also, to what Jeff was saying about being here only if it's decentralized and those kinds of concerns is something that any person that really knows Cardano would have to adhere to be accepted. But it's a different game to actually enforce it and to know how to enforce it. For example, focusing on open source, focusing on contributing, on supporting the technology builders in the ecosystem. And I keep thinking that there's a lot that has already passed with Bitcoin or with other chains where decisions like increasing the block size or something were extremely disputed and even fragmented the whole chain. So it's not concerning. It's almost like a given that one day or sooner or later, someone's going to start talking about, oh, I want to make the blocks bigger, or I want to do something, so I'm going to fork it. Or, well, you don't fork it by yourself, obviously. The thing is, and also already getting into the debate in this reasoning, what happened with Bitcoin, where someone was arguing for a fork in terms of block size. They couldn't get it done, or they eventually got it done, but it was a process of gathering consensus around, or gathering a group of people, a significant group that could actually pull the thread on it, change the versions of their nodes to respect this rule and not that one. And in Bitcoin, I think my point was that it was very hard to do because it had to go one by one and recruit those people for that cause. With governance that we're doing in Cardano, people are already pre-recruited by DREPs. And I'm afraid, I think there should be, it's the same way we have EDI, and I'm sure governance is going to be a part of EDI, right? The Edinburgh Decentralization Index. The rate or the degree to how much the governance delegation is coalesced into one or two DREPs versus having 2,000 DREPs should be something that we should concern ourselves with. I think that's just one train of thought.
Good point. I'm still taking in, but I think that really is like the trick, right? It's like, how do we do what we say we're going to do? Because I think everybody has this aim or goal of decentralization, and it just continues to be aspirational. And I think it's always kind of monitoring kind of like what the tendencies of what the actualities of what's happening, and trying to foresee it, foreshadow, and also like you said, try to see what's actually happening. I think those are just, I think like what you said, I guess I'm trying to say is what you said was just a really, really good point. I think that and for me, it's like super important, right? I think that's for everybody, right? Decentralization, because like that's the heart of it. And so I think a lot of my efforts are just kind of like selfish, because like when I speak to people like in my life, in my world, and when I want to say like we should believe in this, and this is why this is important, and this is why this type of system has integrity because of decentralization. Like I want it to be meaningful. I want to be able to stand by those words and to actually have it represent what it really means.
What I would like to add, since my experience of last week reading the draft and trying to use this link that I'm gonna paste here, so where is where you can go and actually give feedback to the draft, is we are in the beginning of governance, and with this constitution, we're trying to set the foundations of all the next processes, as you mentioned, Lucas, like trying to imagine how many challenges we will be approaching in the future with some decisions we have to make. So I think at this stage of the process, it's not about trying to anticipate that decisions, but actually get a kind of foundation, as I said, to take those decisions well in the future. And having the experience of participation in the Constitution, we tried to did in Chile back in 2021. One of the big problems we had, and in my opinion, one of the reasons why that constitutions never went live, because they wrote it, a panel of experts, they wrote it. So they, after asked the community to vote it, and the community voted no, because it was very complex, extensive. I think that one of the ideas I want to bring to this new constitution for Cardano. It's like, as much simpler and short it could be, I think it's the better, because it's just the foundation. After that, we will build new systems of decisions, of thresholds, or who is voting what. So we just need like very clear rules to like compose the separation of powers or body of powers. That is our task as workshops. And from that, trying to clean it up a little bit. I mean, I'm very confident that the people who worked in the draft are very well knowledge and very illustrated in that kind of task. But I still thinking that is too much complexity for this first stage. And for example, for me, the first sentence of a constitution should be like, what is Cardano blockchain? Or what is Cardano blockchain ecosystem? That is two words or two subjects. The text goes all over again like many times, so we need a clear definition of that. And after that, we can just give like rough guidelines for the future to build the next laws or consensus on chain, I would say.
Robertino, I know you said you were just jumping in and starting to have a look, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on what we were on about, no?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So we cannot get this right away, and I think we won't get it right ever. We will just approximate to the right answer through time. So I do believe, as Sebastian says, that we have to write it in a way that it can be easily amended and extended and modified, because it's going to be wrong. Like, no matter how long and how hard we think, something is going to be wrong. But if we make sure that what we do have can be easily modified, which means not only that it can be extended like with amendments and stuff, but also that the right people can modify it, not just like one subset of people that holds 60% of ADA, but like enough people that is a representative for the whole community. So that's why I was a bit worried when I asked how the power is going to be measured, and it was like 1 ADA, 1 vote. And we already know that that's not a good idea. That's why the rewards for SPOs have a threshold and have a certain formula to calculate, and to avoid having one single super mega SPO that holds all centralizes the whole power of production. So my understanding is that this 1 ADA 1 vote is temporary, and in subsequent amendments is going to be like improved. But I don't think we should get even started with this, because it's going to be, it's going to be more decentralized than it is now, but not enough, in my opinion. So I'm going to log into the. Also, I haven't read the latest draft, so before having any strong opinion, I'm going to refrain it and read it before.
Okay. So as you can see, I'm trying to drop some notes because I really feel like we have different angles. We keep adding different pieces to the puzzle, and I believe a bit in grooming and finding the commonalities, because we often say things from different angles, and we can build on what each other's thinking. But if you zoom out, this is really just a small corner that I found of the Miro, where I just retreated to this little corner there. And I suggest, if you want, you can do the same and maybe even leave it around. Or it's interesting sometimes even asynchronously to come back and look at this, because in the way we're really just cherry picking angles to look at and things to keep revisiting in our mind and in our perspectives.
I have one idea about Seba's question about who is Cardano the Cardano ecosystem. I think like the right answer will be anyone that has skin in the game. So anyone that builds on top of Cardano or that has some sort of dependence on the well-being of Cardano, but it's not feasible to actually, there's no way to measure that. So I think the closest proxy we have is ADA holders. So I will argue that regarding the Constitution, the Cardano ecosystem is the subset of the world population that holds the largest amount of ADA. And that could be...
Could you repeat that? You said, could you just repeat that? What is a subset of what?
The subset of the world population that holds the largest amount of ADA. So I think that's as far as I know, the only definition of Cardano ecosystem that we could enforce rules to, that we can make sure that they will follow the Constitution, because everything else is outside the blockchain. So we have no way of actually really enforcing something.
Okay.
But that makes sense, Eva, or?
Yeah, I think the persona behind the Cardano definition is more or less well described in the draft. So they mention people who hold ADA, people who are working on projects that are built on top of ADA. Because sometimes, once I had a meeting with a very OG in Cardano, and he mentions what if I've been holding ADA for 10 years and building very actively in the community, and at some point I have to sell all my ADA because I need to pay, I don't know, whatever you need to pay. So you're not holding ADA, but you are part of the community, of course. You have been there for 10 years. have been building applications, for example. You have been participating as a DREP or in any other community or any other place of the Cardano ecosystem. So the persona within the Cardano ecosystem, I think we can more or less point it. But I think in the draft of the Constitution, we need to define what is Cardano blockchain or what is Cardano blockchain ecosystem, or both. So when you refer to the matters that you were pointed, for example, it's how would you make a rule about on-chain, how you make a rule on-chain to determine who is a persona into the ecosystem. If you haven't defined the ecosystem in the Constitution, just the Constitution text. Because of course, if you go to cardano.org, you have the definition there. Maybe it's the same that we need in the Constitution. I don't know, probably we need to discuss that. But I think it's a good idea to have this first letter of Cardano digital nation, whatever, a definition. Who are we?
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, and you could argue a lot of things on who it is. I think that person working and building is probably more a community member than many people. Especially imagine someone comes new and just buys a lot of ADA to influence some kind of voting, and they have the same power. But in practice, as we have things right now, basically the community is just people who hold ADA, right? You need to hold ADA to vote. You need to delegate your ADA to vote or whatever it is. So I guess as things are stand, that question has been answered, and it's quite a simple, incomplete answer, but it's the answer we have for now. Because like that also brings like a challenge, right? The challenge of how can you evaluate the contributions of people, and then that can dive into reputation and other things that are the more complex, harder to track, etc., that are being explored in several ecosystems, but there's still like no solution.
It's very subjective, that because there's also, like, for example, companies that build a huge percentage of the Cardano ecosystem, like MLabs, but they don't really have skin in the game because they just charge by the hour and finish the work, and that's it. So I wouldn't consider them, unless they hold a large amount of data, so any decision we make will affect them greatly. Other than that, I wouldn't consider them like really part of the ecosystem, because they don't have really skin in the game in any way, even though they built a lot, right? So it's very subjective. Maybe that's something like, if we go as far as we have to determine, maybe that's going to be like something that's, if we define in the Constitution what we think in theory will be, even though we cannot really know in theory what we want to evaluate, and then the actual committee, a constitutional committee, can, based on that, like decide kind of if based on their information, current information, that person is or not part of the ecosystem. Maybe that could be like part of the deal. And if it is, then whatever decision regarding them can be applied.
I have a quick question. If someone, and this might be a little bit basic, but if somebody doesn't hold ADA, how do you track them? I guess I was thinking that was kind of how you, I don't know, I thought that was kind of like how you establish like kind of almost identity in a way.
Yeah. Go ahead, Robertino.
Yeah, you can establish identity, but we don't want to, because that will mean if I can uniquely identify you without proper zero knowledge procedures, I could, in theory, block certain countries for both. For example, people from Argentina cannot vote in anything Cardano related anymore, for example. So we don't want that to be, I think I don't want that to be an option. So yes, you're right. Like, because we don't want to uniquely identify people, we do want to have this anonymous hash on chain, just only that to identify people, unless like you want to be identified. And because of that, yeah, there's only ADA, and like that's it. That's our only tool.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I might be using like the terminology like incorrectly or maybe haphazardly, but maybe like I was saying that like we kind of know, or like I was thinking that we know that you're a participant in the ADA ecosystem because you have a wallet, right? And that like within that wallet, you maybe I might be answering my own question, you hold ADA, or maybe you can have a wallet without ADA, and maybe that's the way that you kind of denote you're in the ecosystem. I guess I just don't understand like how like you can actually attest that somebody's part of the ecosystem if they don't have ADA, if they don't have a wallet. Like how do you corroborate that? Identity might be might be like the incorrect word, but like I just don't know how you establish. I think I'm not understanding how you establish that.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so I think it's the same as traditional ways, just social constructs. So there's everybody, like a big portion of ADA, of Cardano ecosystem, or at least in Latin America, know who Seba is. So even if we don't know like which wallet he holds, we know that when he says something, he's really entrenched in the community. So because we see him every day, with the podcast and other stuff and the tweets and etc. Now he works at the CF, but before that he was like already know. But that's like the traditional way. We have no on-chain way to know that without ADA. But I think Seba was, his point was on the human side. Like if someone like even if I don't have ADA, if I put like eight hours a day for 3 years, and everybody knows that, I think everybody could like back me up when I say something, even if I don't hold ADA actively. Make sense?
Yeah. So there's like you said, there's a social proof aspect of it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, with all its flaws.
Yeah. Guys, I need to jump to another call. It was a very nice warm-up, and see you next week.
Thank you so much.
See you. Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just, yeah, I think on one side that makes sense, but as you know, Robert, you know, that can happen already, right? For example, Seba as a platform, people know who he is. He can come speak, he will always have a saying, right? And people will hear him. And I think even if you're not from Cardano, but you have a good point and you're able to reach some audience, you can still have a saying even without having ADA, right? I don't know. If someone has a good idea for governance or for something, and I think is a good idea, even if it doesn't hold ADA, I would gladly support that idea. Maybe I would consider voting for it or supporting it. I think those social relationships are probably something in some ways we don't need to define or to work on because they already happen quite naturally. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Maybe we're discussing a non-issue here.
Yeah, maybe. But no, I think there's some issue, like there are some things that I think are important. Like, should we just track ADA? Should we find a way to track previous contributions and attribute like some kind of voting power to these contributions? That's a good question, right? If you're doing something good for the community, why shouldn't you be rewarded with a saying? If you have more knowledge about Cardano, about, I don't know, even building on Cardano, even though you gave the Lamb Labs example, but at least they have some knowledge and they help a lot of companies on Cardano, even it's for money, but hey, they do help. Your opinion should be heard, right? And maybe you should have a vote as well, but that's probably something to consider like right down in the future. I think for this constitution, and that's why I chose the topic I chose, what I would really like to see, especially because we have such a short timeline, is the definition of like the principles we really want. So like what is crucial for us that Cardano is and needs to keep being, and what is crucial that it never becomes like something that we really don't want Cardano to go in that direction. And define those principles as a community, and make sure like those principles are hard to change in the constitution. And in terms of the rest, I agree. The rest we won't have time to define. We won't define it well. It will need to change. So the rest should be pretty upgradable. But yeah, I think the core principles that would be important to define, because it's very easy, and sometimes we already see this a little bit, to drift away from the initial principles and values we had of creating like a fairer system for the world, a better financial system that was open, that empowered individuals. And sometimes it feels like we're forgetting that to go with short-term price and other stuff like that. And I would really like the Constitution to have those kind of well-defined goals and visions for Cardano, so that whenever we are making decisions that are drifting away from those purposes, we can actually take a look at the Constitution and say, hey, does this fit in well with what we were intended to do as a blockchain and as a community, or are we completely going astray from our initial principle?
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Especially as communities grow, right? We'll kind of start to get like a lot of users and a lot of people, and maybe they don't care about those initial principles. They just care about the product or the gains or whatever. And that's a concern. How can we sustain that and pass that vision, right? And I think a constitution could help.
Yeah. It's very interesting because one thing is what you write in the Constitution, the other thing is the system you build to change it. And I think we've been discussing a bit both, or a lot about what we should put in it, but we've also touched today on the point that it's a moving train. Sorry to bring it back to that, but it's really interesting. Also, as you can see, I'm trying to gather a bit what we are going over. So, for example, here we were speaking of some situations of dev shops that they actually know very well, and they could do the science, which is the core or the background, and hopefully the future as well of Cardano, to not just make up things and break them, but to make the science provable before we do changes. So those dev shops know things that most of Cardano people don't understand, how consensus works, how smart contracts and everything, or all the referenced inputs and what's the impact of this and that, and what's the difference in the cost of a transaction if you improve this or that. And then there's the community members that they're just pro or con, based on maybe not so much of a technical understanding, but they do get to vote and influence things. So it's really interesting because, yeah, I know we're just diverging a lot. We're speaking about governance in general, but thinking about the Constitution, how can we try to, like we've been brainstorming, define who's who, what's what, how can things articulate in a way that we do define merit or not define it, but observe it, contemplate how things are probably, what's the human nature, I think, is what we're trying to grasp, so that we can build for it and expecting it to be, as you know, corruption, power corrupts, and that kind of thing is an axiom, I'd say, of how things will progress. So I don't know, it's tricky, but I think it's also puzzling to me because, like I was just saying, we have the body of the Constitution, you have the mechanisms to change the Constitution, but then you also have like the whole ecosystem, the culture, I think, which is broader, and that's going to impact both of the other things. It's a cascade of things that it's, in the end, I've been a technical person or into tech since I was very young, and I usually say the world doesn't need more tech, it needs more culture, more society awareness, and giving a damn about each other. So I think that's where I'm trying to touch on. That one thing that puzzles me, and that's why I had almost some indecision around working as a DREP pioneer, was that we are focusing a lot on the politicians and not so much on empowering and educating the data holders. So I know maybe I'm digressing a bit, but touching exactly from this culture, however we set up the Constitution and the mechanisms to change the Constitution, if then there's a corrupt class of DREPs and the culture of ADA holders does not verify, does not keep them in check, or raise new, more, better DREPs from the ADA holders, because imagine that most of the DREPs are starting to become more self-driven than looking for the best of everyone. It's important that the culture in Cardano can foster that a lot of people are going to step up and care. But those people aren't going to step up if the overall culture is to just delegate. And that's why my concern was with establishing governance in Cardano, starting by establishing a political class. Sorry, I know I took a lot of spins there. But can anyone pick this up, or does anyone want to follow up? Or
I mean, about
Let's
that.
see. I don't have a,
Sorry, Jeff. Yes, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say that does seem worrying. It makes sense, and I don't have a good answer for it yet. I have to think about it.
Yeah. So Pedro, about the difference between culture and rules, I think it's important as well, because like power corrupts, and that's it, a saying in every language for a reason. So I think as much as possible we should enforce, and with what we cannot enforce, we should like have the culture. So I do think that we have to have more culture of direct representation, and like actually, if like being interested in what's being voted and actually voting. So I think that's a good like pro of Cardano, which has this liquid way of moving voting power. So I can just take it away from you before the next. Yes, Pedro.
interested in voting and participating, but even just grooming the DREPs and really caring and really knowing what your DREP is doing, that's also work, and that's in terms of the democratic process that we have outside Cardano. It's, I think, with the biggest problem that yes, we can still have politicians and people that we delegate to, but we should do our work of checking their biases, and sometimes even checking that we are not biased towards them because they are giving us some subsidies or something, because they're too friendly or something. Sometimes it's a bottom-up movement of egoism. Sorry, I like the word. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, Monique, you wanted to say something about that? So, okay, so I'll continue. So the thing is, yes, keeping tabs on the DREPs is like, it's super important, and having the culture and stuff like that. But I think more effective than that would be that DREPs have no incentive to misbehave. The same thing as SPOs have no incentive of accumulating more ADA than the threshold, because that's a negative on their bottom line. We should have the same mechanisms for DREPs, so they don't accumulate more than they should, and we reduce the surface area of attacks by diminishing the power of DREPs. So if we have like 30% of DREPs are corrupt, well, that means that if that 30% is the more powerful DREPs, they still have at most 30% of the power, instead of like having this free range 1 ADA 1 votes and unlimited. So 30%, like it will follow the Pareto rule, and like 5% or 10%, the 10% more powerful DREPs will have 90% of the power. So now the surface area of attack is greater, because you have you have to convince like 10 people to vote for one thing. So then corruption, it gets easier. But if power cannot be accumulated, so by design, no matter how nefarious you are, you cannot like go up like on over 1% of power. Like I think that will at least the people that want that seek for power will be deterred by that. That's it. That's me.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think that should be done in terms of after you reach a certain number of delegators or delegated data, maybe you start having decreased what? That's the question. Decreased what? Voting power? That could make sense, but delegators won't care about that probably. Like if I delegate to you because I like you and I'm not paying that much attention, I will not notice that you are having decreased voting power or something like that.
They will care because if the voting power and the reward power are one-to-one or proportional, I will choose to delegate to someone with less power.
Yes, I agree with that. So like if it associates to the rewards, then they will care about changing. But then do you think how would we do it, right? So we have that mechanism already for SPOs. That's where the rewards supposedly come. We are not rewarded for voting, although we need to vote to be able to withdraw rewards. So how do we incentivize people? Like, so are you going to make the rewards doubly dependent on both voting and both the SPO, or how would that work in practice? I'm just trying to take that to practice, and how you think it could work.
No idea. I don't know. I mean, because we have no mechanism yet for that. Like we have nothing for that, not even in the guardrails validators or anywhere on the technical side. But it could be implemented like that. I mean, the implementation is not the problem, I think, but because we could take into account your votes. The same way every epoch we just take a snapshot of the whole Cardano blockchain distribution. We could do the same for votes. So the mechanism we could technically solve that if enough people care. But yeah, I mean, I think that same mechanism, if it's for active voting, that is chosen at the same epoch, for example, for that specific case, not like the always abstain or always yes or always no. That mechanism not only will incentivize people to delegate to weaker persons, that will also incentivize them to vote by themselves.
Should we, for example, or do you think it makes sense to, like, for example, have a limit on how much delegation can a voter actually get? So like a voter, a DREP. So like from that moment you achieve a certain value, nobody else could delegate to you. And just thinking of something simpler to implement maybe.
Right. I mean, currently the system we have for SPOs is a logarithmic curve that it starts really high, but then the slopes approaches zero. So at some point it's like pointless. It's not a hard stop, but yeah,
I know.
like pointless. So we could do that, and we could also implement like quadratic voting. So if you vote all your voting power on one option, it reduces your power by the quadratic formula. But if you split it, every different vote starts from zero. So that incentivizes ranking your options. So say, I prefer this one, and second this one, and third this one, and that makes a more fair choice than just voting all or nothing. Make sense?
It does, but I've always been weary about quadratic voting, especially when we were talking about it on Catalyst. And because, as soon as I understood it, it made sense to me that if you split your bags, you actually get more voting power. So if you have 1 million, you vote with 1 million, and it gets square rooted, because that's the quadratic part. But then if you split it, you can actually get beneficiated instead of if you get more power than you had initially. You're aware of this, right? That's why we need to have solid decentralized IDs or something like that, so that people can't split their bags to get more voting power. Otherwise, we are creating that mechanism.
No, but it should work the other way around. So, for example, if I have 3 options and I vote one point to option 1, if I want to add a second point for option 1, I have to pay 2 ADA, and I have to put a third point into option 1. I have to put 4, and then like 16. So it gets
More expensive.
So that incentivizes me to not put everything in one option, but to split it. And that way, like it's.
So you could, it's not just quadratic. Before being quadratic, it's the fact that you can split your vote and do that, but you need to prioritize it. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you have like linear voting, you can put 1,000 ADA in option 1, and it will count as 1,000 points, and that's it. Yeah.
But when you were saying, if you go through this system, the first vote that you do counts at 100% weight, and then the second vote is half watered down, let's say. Okay, I think I understand. It's not the same problem that I was mentioning. I understand. Maybe, Monique, do you want to share what you wrote on the chat, just to go around the room a bit?
Oh, sure. I was just, oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just saying, ultimately, I think that what eventually we'll get to is a combination of incentives, disincentives, or controls to support the DRAP, because in general we're talking about individuals with lots of power, right? And so there's always going to be some type of incentive to accumulate more. We talked about always going to be there. So I feel like I liked what Pedro, what you were saying before about having this component where we don't necessarily focus on the DRAP so much as their constituents as well, making sure that they keep the DRAPs in line. And I do like the idea of having like this. I think it was mentioned, and I'm not as attuned or kind of up to date on like a quadratic like voting, but this, I think I heard it mentioned, having a max influence power. I think all of these things have to kind of be incorporated and to that end evaluated on an ongoing basis, like, because times change, people change, and I think that's it. I think a lot of times you kind of create these mechanisms and we never revisit them to ensure that they're working. One of the things that I wanted to mention, just to throw out there, is that I see like on Twitter or X right now a lot of D-reps who are out there, they're campaigning, and I'm like, okay, they have a lot of followers. You kind of already see kind of a superficiality that exists. That's, I don't know, and I think I just wanted to say that, but yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to mention.
When it's that obvious after just a few weeks of hard fork, you can tell it's going to be like the name of the game. If that's the expression. One thing I'd just like to add is really just this part here. I dropped it on the chat, and it's like what you were just alluding to, and I think what we're going around here is like if you have someone that has max power or these kinds of variables or identity verification so that they can't vote for others or something like that, I think we should care about, like, there's a lot of real world relationships and trust or influence that can then, one thing is we're actually voting from this side, but there's a lot of things that can happen on the other side. There's a lot of influence. You can have people lobbying around the world, literally. So I think we can't really avoid that, and that's why I don't go for the max limitings. I think everything needs to be very fluid, and also something here around if what I was suggesting of a bottom up keeping everyone in check from all the way from the ADA holders. It's a matter of ADA holders voting or voting themselves or knowing about the ideas and the changes they stand for, and not just who they are voting on blindly, let's say. Jeff, do you want to add? Yes.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that that would be perfect if we could get people to do it. But I feel like that's the idea of having regular democracy, right? People tend to be lazy and not actually do. And we even have this extra incentive where you lose your words if you don't pick a delegation option. And like, I feel like people will pick some ones and ignore it forever after. Like the actual incentives don't seem to be there to get people to vote on the ideas. It would be really nice if we could figure out a way to do that.
I'm not sure I'd be able to summarize because you were breaking a bit, but thanks. Guys, we're really
sorry, I'll write in the chat. Sorry.
Well, we're actually just 2 minutes away from the end of today's call, and I wanted to make you a challenge. I think I've spoken with Sebastian at least, and we have 2 more calls scheduled. This is all about Lisbon. We're happy to have Monique and whoever wants to join. I'm going to try to publish both these videos plus the session 0 over the weekend on our YouTube to challenge more people to join us. But to the people on the call in Lisbon, I was going to ask, do you want to meet and we can do the Tuesday call on a conference room somewhere in Lisbon? I could set that up.
I will be, so I won't be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
for myself, as I told you, Tuesdays are quite hard. I'm not even sure I can make the call, and the conference, I'm 100% sure I won't be able to.
Yeah, I'll keep the offer open for Thursday then, if it's possible. Have a look at their calendar, and I'll write it on Telegram as well. I'm not sure if anyone else has any ideas, anything else to share for today. I think it was really, really nice debate. That's why I wanted to have a series of things, of calls, because people start getting into the mood and the theme, I mean, and going a bit deeper in their thoughts. So I'm looking forward for the other 2 calls that we're going to have next week. Okay.
Me too. Okay. See you guys.
Cheers, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.
Same.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.